I am Gary Adcock. I'm the Executive Director of Filmscape Chicago, and I handle all of the classroom programming like this. And it's a real pleasure to have all of you here. Today, the Illinois Film Office is going to share some stuff with us, and Jonah Zeiger is going to run this from the other thing. I'd like to introduce Todd Freese from Resolution Digital.
Hello, hello.
Andy Jarosz from Smash Virtual Productions. And down the front, I have Peter Hawley from the Illinois Film Office and Jeff Glaser from SHOWRUNNER, who's going to come up with it later on. I'm going to get out of the way and let this session run.
All right, thank you so much, Gary. Appreciate it. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Filmscape. How's everybody doing today? Excellent. All right, this is very, very exciting day today, and I'm very excited about today's session. I'm Jonah Zeiger. I'm the director of the Chicago Film Office, and we'll hear from my counterpart who's going to run the second half of this session, Peter Hawley from the Illinois Film Office. Just want to make it clear, we got city and state together, shoulder to shoulder, in partnership supporting this event, together with partners from World Business Chicago, and we're thrilled to be participating in Filmscape, and especially this keynote on virtual production. How many people are experts in virtual production in the room? Know everything about it? Okay, no. All right. So how many have heard some stuff about this? Really curious? Great. How many people have done it before? Anyone involved in virtual production? Okay, great. So we have some people. I think what I would like to say is today's session, we're going to basically try to bring the entire community up to speed and get some fundamentals. So we're not going to go deep dive, super technical level here. There is another session, I believe, at 1 on cinematography that's going to go a little bit more into the technical aspects. And then there's another section on budgeting for virtual production that if you want to go deeper dive, there's more content here. But today is really, we're introducing virtual production to Chicago. And this form of filmmaking is something that has antecedents in prior forms of filmmaking, rear projection, green screen, but it has really revolutionized the film industry in the last few recent times, and especially in the last year. Chicago has gotten into this space thanks to the two companies that I have represented here before us. So I want to give a chance for both of these, both of our guests to kind of talk a little bit more about their companies and their pivot into virtual. Then we'll look at a video and get a little bit more information and deep dives. And then after that, I'm going to invite Peter up to introduce a guest from a really amazing company that's doing virtual production and software for virtual. So Todd, Resolution Digital has been a bedrock of the production community for quite a while here in Chicago. What made you guys decide to pivot into virtual, and what's your thinking? Give us a little bit more of the origin story in terms of this expansion.
Sure. Everybody in this room knows us as RDS, right? Film studios. But the actual larger side of our company, Resolution Productions Group, we're known for very large live events, stockholders meetings, auto shows, ballroom shows and things like that, which is why we have around 3,000 tiles of LED in inventory. And we started this a really long time ago. I always say, like, when you have a bunch of LED guys hanging out with film guys, eventually a camera comes out. We always get a little bit of a chuckle, when they say Gravity was the first people to use this, and like we beat them by years, and the LED wasn't that great back then compared to what we have now. And we first started out with plates, and then when the Unreal Engine came out, we bought a tracking system and sort of got it going. And our goal was always not to be the only provider in town, but to make sure that Chicago is represented equally with New York, London, LA, and to make sure that shows don't look at us as a second-class citizen, that we have all the tools and facilities. And it's really important to the large shows to not be the only provider, right? They want to have options. They want to have, we're thrilled when Andy started up Smash, because it's like we want to make sure that all of the studios have this incredible technology.
That's fantastic. That's great to hear. And Andy, if you could tell us a little bit about, my basically understanding is, Smash is the first virtual only production studio in Chicago, which is extremely exciting, and we're really happy to have this capability in the city. But tell us about what was the thinking that Chicago needed a virtual only production studio?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are a virtual production only facility. We're basically a big soundstage with a giant LED volume and a dedicated staff to run it. You have offices and all that, but we don't do anything else. And we are actually brand new. We opened last September, and it's been a labor of love from me for many years trying to get this off the ground. But yeah, kind of adding to what Todd said, this technology enables filmmakers both in Chicago and out of town to consider Chicago as a more legitimate place to shoot. It eliminates a lot of the issues that shooting in Illinois has with things like the weather and just lack of locations, things like that. You can't go out to the sand dunes here, for example. With virtual production, you can. And so in many ways, this technology makes more sense to exist in a place like Chicago than it does in somewhere like LA. And so we really wanted to bring it here in a big way, in a way that any production of any size could feel comfortable using, and to have the resources to be able to offer them and the highest level of expertise so that we can consistently deliver high quality results so they feel confident using the process and hopefully, integrate it as a core part of their production workflow.
That's great. That's great to hear. So another thing I wanted to do, we're going to look at a video in a few minutes, but I just wanted to say I think there's some new terminology, some new vocabulary that I think is coming into use. Some words might not be familiar to people. Some might be words that we've heard used in filmmaking prior, but they've kind of taken on new definitions. So just on bedrock, I just want to put a couple out there. I think when you start talking about virtual, you start hearing about volumes. What's a volume? What's an LED volume? And the other is, you mentioned Unreal, which I think is a leading software program, but for a real-time rendering engine. Can you just give us like the top 2 or 3, 4 concepts that we kind of need to have a basic understanding of in order to begin to understand what virtual production is?
Yeah, the term volume is an often overused comment. It means a lot of different things based on the context. Some people refer to an LED, a stage with LED as an LED volume, right? So it's referring to the space. But a scene inside Unreal is also called a volume. And so a lot of times the words get mixed up, but there's a lot of times you're talking about, I tend to look at the word volume all encompassing, meaning that it's not just what's going on in the Unreal Engine, but also the LED and the stage and the camera tracking, the sort of the whole thing. I don't know, you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, absolutely. The term volume comes from the idea of a tracking volume with OptiTrack, which is what they used first on The Mandalorian. And so I assume the terminology is just sort of carried over, but it's sort of the physical and virtual space combined to create this like superpositioned kind of meta space essentially. So you could say we're going to move the couch into the volume, and that's meaning that you're going to move it into sort of your play area, so to speak, your shootable area.
That's great. That's great. And then in terms of a real-time rendering engine, the technology that goes into that, are there any key terms that we feel like we need to talk about a little bit for people to have a grounding in that?
I would say one of the ones, I hate this term, but one of the ones that's most common is IC VFX, or in-camera VFX, which is a term I think pioneered by Epic Games, makers of Unreal. And it's just a sort of a catch-all term for the whole process of shooting something live in camera with a real-time camera-tracked environment.
That's great. And I think there's another phrase that I have found helpful, which is kind of a flipping the paradigm, and I think this is what this is all about, which everyone's familiar with the phrase "fix it in post," which I think has been a cliche in filmmaking for decades. But I think what we talk about when people are talking about virtual productions, they say "fix it in pre." Yeah. Do you use that language?
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of that because given my background as post-production, I was on the receiving end of the fix it in post mentality. Fix it in pre has really been the truth since the dawn of filmmaking, but really in virtual production, one of the big things that changes is that the cadence, the schedule cadence is very different. I always say like the cadence of a film shoot really hasn't changed in 25 years. Things have gotten faster. We're working on more projects at once, but the importance of getting the studio involved much earlier is critical.
I would just to add to that as well, the idea of fix it in pre obviously is funny nowadays, especially because fix it in post was such a joke for a long time. But with virtual production, you're starting with nothing. We don't even know where the sun is, right? You open up an Unreal scene and it's totally blank. So we need to work through that process to know what you want to do, what you have in your head, and work with you to figure out what is actually going to be on the screen, because there is no starting point.
That's great.
Yeah, and we do a lot of commercial side TV commercial stuff, and clients are not used to approving things pre-shoot. A lot of times they just kind of give you a blanket, yeah, it's approved, because they have the mentality of, we'll just fix it in post. And it's like, no, you don't understand. Like, you have to sign off on this or there's financial consequences. And so a lot of it is working with clients to educate their clients to make sure that they understand that they really need to pay attention to this stuff before the shoot.
Okay, great. So is everyone following along? Are you sufficiently confused and or clarified on this? Are you curious? Would you like to see something that I think demonstrates a little bit more? So yeah, so we're going to play a video called "What is Virtual Production?" I think we'll clear the stage to so we can have a nice clear view, and then we'll come back. We'll talk a little more, and then we'll move. I'll hand it over to Peter for the second part of this.
Virtual production. Virtual production. Virtual production. Yeah. Virtual production.
The first time I heard the term virtual production, I was like, "Oh, we're going to be shooting this with goggles on? What the fuck is that?"
Virtual production's a little bit vague.
The common definition is working within an LED volume or an LED wall where your virtual background is projected and you're sort of using that as your location.
The obvious benefit is that you can shoot any location, anytime, anywhere.
Instead of sending your film crew out, shutting down streets, you bring the world into your studio, put it up on LED walls, and you shoot everything there.
In the end, the reason we're doing virtual production is production efficiencies. So we kind of take that attitude for the entire pipeline, that we want to optimize for speed and flexibility.
On the face of it, virtual production is daunting. The first day that you're doing virtual production, you're not doing anything, you're just learning. Seeing how walls work, seeing how lighting works in the virtual environments versus the physical environments, how to focus, blend between both the spaces. And as soon as you figure that out, you unlock everything. But until then, it's a lot to learn.
I don't know if you can see it back here. It kind of looks like a TV-ish. And like you see, you're like, oh, it's like a little bit blurry. But then the minute it transfers to the monitor, it looks like the real deal.
You're going to see the environment 3 times. You see it once when it's being built just on a computer monitor. You see it again to your eye when you're physically standing in the volume, and you see it a 3rd time through the lens of the camera. And it's going to look completely different all those times. You have a ton of control creatively. It helps a ton logistically. And if the alternative is shooting on green screen or blue screen, for example, everyone on set is so much happier with the LED volume.
A lot of what has happened in virtual production so far has been these big budget sci-fi movies. So there hasn't been a lot of innovation on figuring out how to do virtual production in a cost-effective way. Because these scenes we're shooting are like coffee shops, not spaceships, and interiors of offices, not weird planets. Figuring out basically how to do virtual production very inexpensively and quickly. And so that's something that you wouldn't find out on a Star Wars show because you're building spaceships.
I've had experience shooting on a lot of green screens. I look back and I'm like, damn, the actors would have benefited so much from a video wall, from seeing the world, the director, myself as an AD. I really want to be a part of a set that uses it again and again and again.
It's just been really accessible. I mean, we're filming during the winter here in Chicago, so it makes it that much better.
Yeah, I can't believe how good it looks when you look at it.
It is baffling.
And I didn't see any of the outdoor stuff you did yesterday.
We were on treadmills.
Brave New World.
I would encourage producers to look at this from a time, budgetary point of view, and also to think about their crews, to consider this as one of the tools in their toolkit.
You can choose to work in a way that is fulfilling and sustainable. And the world is changing, technology is changing, it allows us to do that. So are we going to do things the old way and be miserable like we were before, or are we going to take on the challenges and the stress and the freedom and happiness of working in this new way that we can work?
There we go. Okay, great. Thank you. I think that was very, very helpful. So we'll just talk a few more minutes, maybe 5 more minutes, and then I'll turn it over. But the video, I think, does a great job of showcasing some of the advantages. One thing that I'm struck by is just more on a directorial point of view, and the creative point of view of actors having maybe the challenges of working with green screen where you're in a completely blank environment versus that. Can you just talk a little bit more about what actually needs to be, what's the non-virtual, how does not non-virtual, but physical production change when you're working on an LED volume in terms of the visuals and also the production workflow of working with actors and various other aspects?
That's a very big topic. I'll try to condense it down. One of the things we notice is like we learn new benefits of virtual production on every job. Being able to sort of not worry about weather, lighting changes and things like that are a huge benefit. Actors really love it versus really understanding the scene that they're acting in, getting the eye lines right and things like that versus green screen. You're not staring at some guy with a tennis ball. Obviously better sound. There's a million things. That's such a big question. Maybe you can.
Yeah, well, one of the things I'll say, so actually we learned this on Resignation, but you put a film crew on a stage for a few weeks and they'll start to go a little stir crazy, right? I was on Chicago Med for 3 years, and so I have experienced that firsthand. Virtual production, we were hearing from the crew of Resignation that it felt like they were in a new space every single day. They weren't getting that same fatigue. And it's a small thing, but keeping your crew happy, keeping your actors happy, it's going to translate to a better experience and better results at the end of the day, we believe.
Yeah, the production efficiencies really start to compound logarithmically. Working in a controlled environment, you're saving little bits of time over and over and over, and the amount of, to be able to do, 3 to 5 virtual locations in a day is pretty outstanding.
And that requires prep, right? You're not going to suddenly show up on the day and expect to get 3 locations done. But when you put in that prep, and the prep is a lot less than a lot of people think it's going to be, it is so efficient, and you can get so much done in a day. It's a very remarkable process.
That's great. Yeah, the thing that struck me so far is that it really enables you to focus the physical aspects, art direction, and the acting, in a much more focused, circumscribed area. So I understand that there's a relationship between the backgrounds that are supplied by the virtual background, and then is there a rule of thumb for the area of the scene that needs to be dressed with physical with art direction, props, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the most important departments when shooting on an LED volume is the prop department. At the beginning, everybody thought this was going to put them out of business, and it's the exact opposite. I always say if you just put somebody standing in front of an LED, it kind of looks like a green screen, right? They need lots of props around them. I tend to always want 3 planes of props, something, between the camera and our talent, some stuff around the talent, and then something between the talent and the LED. I would say, there's no magic in virtual production, it's science. But there is one piece of magic, is the way the camera sees it with the lighting and the props is what makes it, completely seamless and photorealistic. I always tell clients that when you look at the LED yourself, nobody's fooled that you're looking at a photograph, right? Maybe it looks a tad CGI or something like that. You really have to watch the monitor, the way the camera sees it, because there's this little transition magic that happens in all of these pieces working together that completely fools the eye.
Yeah, the light, it's screens that are physically emitting light, and that light is traveling through the lens, and it's interacting with it in the same way that it would if it was real. And so if you choose to use anamorphic lenses or vintage lenses or filtration, or you smoke or haze, all of that looks so good because it looks extremely natural. It just helps blend everything together even more. You're not going to get that on a green screen or a blue screen.
That's great. Great to hear. Yeah, so I think at this point we can go ahead and transition to the second part. I'm going to hand this over to Peter Hawley, Director of the Illinois Film Office. He's going to introduce a fantastic new company that has recently relocated to Chicago and test-driven and really did some great work here. So, Peter, take it away.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Jonah. I guess I did not get the black shirt memo, but I'll make do. So before I talk to Jeff, I want to just say one thing about Smash. So I've been to Smash several times, and I met Andy the first time 4 or 5 years ago in this little warren of offices where I walked in and I said, I'm going to either never get out of here or I better leave breadcrumbs to find my way out. And Andy said, I've got this idea I've been working on, and he showed me this thing, and it was a projection, it was a screen. It wasn't even like a screen like this. And I went, oh my God, he's got an idea here. And it's been 4.5 years, and that came to reality last year. And one other, you're talking about Fix It in Pre. I was there a few weeks ago for a test shoot, and they were shooting LED screen with 16 millimeter film. I mean, the idea that you're shooting film, because there it is, it's there. You don't have to go fix it in post. You don't have to marry it together in the editing room. That was amazing. And then just a week or so ago, a group, in my job at the state of Illinois is bring production here, and a group from Lithuania was here, and we went over to Andy, and they were blown away. I mean, it was just really impressive. So this is not a small thing. So we're going to switch now to talk about content creators, right? So this is the physical production, and Jeff Glaser from SHOWRUNNER is here to talk about SHOWRUNNER and to talk about content creation. And what we're going to do now is we're going to talk a little bit, a few questions. We're going to screen some behind the scenes from Resignation. And then we're going to open it up to you guys for a Q&A where all 5 of us, or actually mostly those 3. And Jonah and I will watch. So Jeff, welcome to Chicago.
Thank you so much.
And tell us a little bit about both SHOWRUNNER and then Resignation. These guys talked about Resignation, but we didn't get into specifics.
Yeah, great. Yeah, so I represent part of the company SHOWRUNNER, which is based here in Chicago. We moved here from New York and Mexico City essentially to start this business. And behind you here, it might be hard to see with kind of we're in the way, but essentially just high level here, SHOWRUNNER is an operating system. And I know when you saw briefly this, like, what is virtual production, there's new terminology, there's tons of protocols and languages and various things on set that don't necessarily communicate very well. And virtual production is intimidating because of all this newness to it. So SHOWRUNNER basically takes these different technologies and protocols or languages of technology and kind of groups them all into one easy-to-use interface. So when you go work with an RDS or with Andy at Smash, you're basically able to empower your crew, who are directors or gaffers or anyone who's never worked in this space before. You can basically start having ownership over your same job in physical production in virtual. So to give you an example, like these lights right here that are on the stage here, well, with SHOWRUNNER, and if this was the LED wall at one of their stages, is essentially from your iPad, you can then control where the position of the artwork or 3D world is on the actual wall itself. You could control the lights as well. So you can kind of think of it as your go-to kind of implementation of a workflow. If you go to work with Andy or Todd or 4 or 5 other virtual stages that we've shot at, the workflows are very different. You'll never find the same workflow at any space because this industry is so new. And so SHOWRUNNER is really kind of our best effort to democratize and to implement a workflow that could be more standard no matter where in the world you're shooting. So it's an operating system that allows you to have, empower your crew so that you can say, hey, you also have a job and you can change the lights in this set the same way you would in a virtual world. So that's kind of a high level. We can get more into it in the Q&A if anyone has specifics.
But SHOWRUNNER also creates things.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
And we talked about Resignation. So tell us about SHOWRUNNER from that side of things.
Exactly, and that's actually, the technology was born from wanting to produce in this world. It's like, all right, we have to figure out a way that we can make this easier, basically, to not minimize the skill or knowledge that's needed to do it, but it's like, that's how it was born, is wanting to create content. And so we produced here a pilot series called Resignation, which was where some of that behind the scenes was shot, and it will be the behind the scenes you'll see here momentarily, kind of like the making of Resignation at RDS and Smash using SHOWRUNNER. So it's kind of a lot, but yeah, we wanted to come to Chicago. When we as a business were first determining, there was places all over the world on the map. It was, Atlanta, Georgia, it was Louisiana, Chicago, Puerto Rico. And I mean, as a small business and producers, it's like the tax credit is usually like a really big reason for moving a business somewhere. And so when our founders were getting on the phone, calling different film commissions, and this is a true story, is like Peter was actually the only person who called us back. And they like kind of blew them all away. We're like, wait a minute, like the film commissioner called you back? Yeah, I think it's Peter. And so, but you know what? But when you're a business looking for confidence and looking for somewhere new to establish yourself, like that kind of like personality and relationship directly from the top down, as the Film Commission standpoint, was a huge motivator. And so that's really, honestly, Peter, it was you calling Sylvia back. So thanks.
And then we went out, they came to Chicago, and we went out to have coffee on Wells Street, right by where Freese and Friends used to be. And I met Brandon, who's in the room here somewhere back in the back, and Shane and Sylvia, and then about a month later, they said, we're moving to Chicago.
Yeah.
And then about a month after that, they came up to our house and walked their dogs with us, But yeah, it was great. And so I want to talk to you about you. Explain what Shane and Sylvia are doing now, why they're not here.
Yeah, so I'm kind of the proxy stand-in for for two of the larger kind of spokespeople of our company. But they are currently doing private screenings in LA. They just finished, and now they're currently doing a screening today in New York City. Of the pilot we shot, trying to raise money and funds so that we can bring more content to produce here. So they're on this hunt for financing and interest for distribution, all to be funneled back to the state and the city. So that's where they are. Sorry, you have to see me instead. They're
Well, wait, before you say apologize too much, this is not a small bit of business we're talking about here. So, Jeff, talk about your background, which is really fascinating, and I think it gives you some context for how we as a city and state and the film industry, and of course, virtual production are growing. So tell us your background.
Well, basically, I know a lot of people, and I see a lot of familiar people as well in this small time, or the short amount of time we've been here. But like everyone, I was kind of the equivalent of a PA, but in the accounting department for a small TV show in South Carolina out of college. And so my whole path in the film business really was always accounting. So I was an accounting assistant, production accountant, controller, finance executive, and kind of grew from that side of the business. And it's really interesting when you only work like from that lens on a production or a film, you start to kind of sit into the problem solving of a line producer or the production executives who are financing or funding the movie. You're looking at costs. You're looking at how to find creative solutions to maybe reduce spend if you need to spend. If your director wants a Pee-wee dolly one day for $1,800 and you don't have it, then you have to pull and find savings somewhere else in the budget. So my whole background was really in accounting and finance. And I worked in Colombia and Bogota for 3 years on the Narcos series as an accountant. And then soon after that, I went to work on the studio side for Netflix in their LA office and kind of managing all of the Spanish-speaking territories, so like all content genres in any Spanish-speaking country. And then Netflix expanded to Madrid, so I went to Madrid for 3 years to help build out that finance team and kind of implement the studio, boringness of how to manage money. And then they did the same thing in Mexico. So I went from Madrid back to Mexico City for a couple years to help manage and build out that financial team. And I was actually in Mexico City when Shane and Sylvia flew down, and they pitched me. They were like, Jeff, Netflix is kind of cool. Their content's not that great anymore, but Netflix is kind of on the down, Jeff. Get out while you're ahead. And so literally it was one dinner over a couple bottles of wine, and about a month later I moved to Chicago. I quit that kind of trajectory that I was on with them, and was ready for kind of a new professional adventure. And it's been insane here. Probably the greatest community of filmmakers, and just we've partnered a lot with Camera Ambassador, with Erica over there, with you guys at the Film Commission. There's just a huge network here that has been so open-armed that in any of the cities we've produced in the world, the whole mentality of filmmakers here and the openness is something really incredible that I really haven't seen before. It's really remarkable, the Chicago love of the filmmaking world. It's very new.
I wanted Jeff to tell that story because we are actively always, my office and Jonah's office are recruiting production to come here, and that is not just productions, but it's also businesses. I think the most significant thing that we've done, everyone knows that, we've expanded the film tax credit a year ago, which includes production accountants, which if there's any production accountants in the room, We need more production accountants in the Illinois film business, and production accountants, that's part of the expanded film credit. A non-resident production accountant can be included, which is weird because there are plenty of CPAs in Illinois. But the reason I wanted Jeff to tell that story was to show you that we're bringing work here, businesses here, and as I started to say, the most important thing to me about the expansion of the tax credit is the extension of the tax credit. So in April or March, Governor Pritzker signed an extension of the film production tax credit to go for another decade. So it expires. Yes.
Yeah,
Good,
it's
thank you.
huge. Yeah, and I will say we just got our first tax credit back. So
Yeah,
thank you, Peter.
So you guys filmed in fall, late fall, early winter.
November, December, during like the heart of winter.
And I signed off on their tax credit a couple weeks ago, which says my office does a good job.
Right, and that's why.
Or more accurately, the tax side of my office does a good job. I just have a pen that signs.
Yeah. No, it was an amazing process. We've done tax credits in many countries and states, and like the transparency and communicative lines here are something. Yeah. Like the crew here, it's a very new kind of level of open armed, and the relationships are great. Yeah. And I'm not just saying that, Peter, because I want you to sign the next one, but the first one's done, so we're good there.
So what I want to do now is I want to screen the behind the scenes, because I think that will give you some more context, and then when that's done, we'll open it up. All of us will come up here and we'll open up the Q&A.
Yep, and this will be like, it's 8 minutes, so it is basically just the behind the scenes of how we shot Resignation here at the 2 studios that you heard of before, and hopefully it could warrant some questions or some fun conversations afterward, and yeah, hope you enjoy it.
These big budget series all use virtual production technology to bring fantastic worlds into studios made out of LED walls, and they cost a fortune. We decided to use virtual production to produce our own TV show. We wanted to prove that we could do what they did for a fraction of the cost, and that this technology could work for anything, not just sci-fi and superheroes. This would be the first ever TV pilot to be made entirely in virtual production. What could go wrong?
Holy fuck, did he just fall down a manhole?
This is the story of Resignation.
I was a freelance programmer and designer and then journalist. When I was working with freelancers, one of my business partners and the co-author of a book of mine, we started talking about how this life of being an independent worker is awesome and liberating and terrible and stressful. So we had all these stories of what it's like to be an independent worker, knowing that there's this huge class of people that are doing that or becoming that. And we wanted to tell that story because we didn't see it in Hollywood. It wasn't on TV. And so we wrote this script called The Freelancers. My agents at CAA, they said they loved it, and they said, this is the best script we have right now in comedy. We're gonna pitch it to Seth MacFarlane, and it's gonna go here and there. And then a few weeks later, the pandemic hit.
I have today declared that the coronavirus presents a public health emergency in the United States.
The great shutdown of 2020 is underway.
You know, they sort of threw their hands up in the air and were like, we don't know if there's ever going to be a TV show ever made again. So the project was shelved for a while.
During the pandemic, a lot of people who got laid off became freelancers. But freelancers literally saved the day. People were starting to question, do I have to work the way I'm being told? And can I choose my own path? So we dusted off that script about freelancers and we rewrote it in the context of this post-Great Resignation generation. When this story was on ice, I co-founded a tech company to help make filmmaking easier called SHOWRUNNER. It's smart home tools to make it more efficient for people to tell great stories on TV and in film. And one of the big tools that we'd started working on is this thing called virtual production.
The common definition is working within an LED volume or an LED wall where your virtual background is projected and you're sort of using that as your location.
The obvious benefit is that you can shoot any location, anytime, anywhere. You can shoot on the moon in the morning, and then you go to the Grand Canyon in the afternoon. If you want to shoot a sunset for 12 hours, you can do that.
We've been making these tools to make it easier to unlock opportunities for people to tell stories their way without as many gatekeepers.
We kind of realized that we were doing this parallel story to that old script that we had just sort of renovated. And so we had this choice: do we take this script the Hollywood way, or do we try and prove something and do it ourselves? We wanted to show the world that you don't have to be Game of Thrones or Star Wars to use this technology, and for it to provide you with the opportunity to do more with the same budget.
I don't know, I think any technology that only benefits $100 million projects can't be considered an advancement. Real technological advancement only happens when you can empower anyone to do things that they never thought they could do before.
We're out to prove that there's a sustainable model out there that people should consider for TV.
And then we found ourselves in a place where we're like, okay, now we actually have to do it.
Quiet, please, we're speeding.
Every day there's a new thing that's worrying me about this.
There's no actual way in Unreal right now to have light come through a stained glass window and illuminate the room, but we have to figure out how to fake it right now.
I have a feeling this will take a while.
Because this is still at 0%.
Okay. Have you heard the treadmills yet?
Brandon mentioned that it's easy to animate car traffic.
Did he now?
Is easy wrong? Yeah, Brandon is...
Impossible?
Impossible?
We learned early on that there's a little bit of a language barrier. You know, film crews speak in film speak, right? Unreal people generally don't. They're coming out of the gaming industry, they're coming out of the 3D industry. And so having a really tight-knit group, we sort of formed a new language on the way to solve problems, but also communicate super efficiently.
We got a flicker on a wind turbine. You are definitely not supposed to do walk and talks in virtual production. We shot these 4 days before it snowed. This show is set in spring, possibly fall.
But there's no leaves.
Yeah. Right. So it's kind of work with this footage, try to figure out how to make it work in camera or find another option. I mean, I don't even know what the other option is.
Got it.
Lose the shot.
This is echoey.
If you're 5 feet above her, that's a problem.
Be careful. Think about when those walls warm up and when they cool down.
Finding ways to naturally hide seams between the virtual wall and the physical elements of the set is a challenge. I was really thrilled to discover that the process of working with the modeling teams is very much the same process that we go through in set design and location selection and set decoration, right? You're having the exact same conversations with them that you're having with the people that are putting together the physical side.
Every time 3 or 4 of our tracking cameras get blocked by stuff, we need to add a new one in a very specific spot that has a full view of the trackers on the filming cameras.
We had this amazing crew. They were happy to be at work. We'd been wrapping early. There's one thing that people were shit-talking.
We had to fly Josh Myers in from LA to play Shane, and we were shooting pretty close to the holidays there, so he had to do all of his scenes in 2 days.
There is a very clever solution to this that they've come up with, which is to actually allow us to be shooting on that one while we're prepping this one, so it's a bit of a bounce back and forth. This is the do-si-do, the dance that we'll be doing the whole way through.
We are trying to do 2 full sets at the same time, which means a lot of bounce back and forth, which means a lot of attention splitting.
A jungle, a fancy bathroom.
Carnegie Hall, the Grand Canyon, an office space. I should have this list out. What else are we shooting? We're ahead of schedule, and so we're adding shots, which is not what you'd expect on the day we're trying to do the impossible.
3, 2, 1.
3, 2, 1, fire!
Okay, got the cannon blast.
Be able to shoot 4 exteriors and 4 interiors in 1 day is absolutely amazing. And it just goes to show the power of virtual production.
That is a Raven resignation.
If you are a studio running virtual production and you're not renting your stage 365 days a year, you know, the market is trying to address, like, well, what would make more producers, directors, studios interested in making virtual production? Is it the technological barriers seem too large? Does it seem like it'd be too expensive?
I think anyone who's watching this, who's thinking about doing anything in filmmaking with new technology, that new technology is your excuse for change management. It's your excuse to get stakeholders in earlier to align and disagree and hash things out earlier on so that you can be on the same page as you go through the process.
Chapter 1, stop working. Not you.
She's like an Asian Alexa.
What race do you think Alexa is?
Edgar Allan Poe was a freelancer, and he wrote whatever he wanted.
Yeah, but he also died drunk in a gutter.
Like a champion!
So what happens now?
I'm hot. Hi, everybody. So questions, please, for these guys. Back there. Yes. I like going to bars.
I would say that, I can't speak for Andy, but, we're filmmakers ourselves, and it comes down to the creative. We take on a couple passion projects a year. If you send us a piece of creative, if there's something in there that we're motivated, intrigued by, we will make it happen.
Add to that. Yeah, I mean, we do the same thing. We run movie studios, so of course we want to make movies. And if you guys have an exciting project, we absolutely will do it. We'll fit it in. But I'll also just add, not every tool needs to be used for everything, right? If virtual production makes sense for the project, then great. But it doesn't work well when you try and force it somewhere where it's not necessarily going to work. So.
What would be an example of it not being a good fit for a show or a movie or something? Like, what would be
Yeah, the question was, what's would be an example of it not being a good fit?
I think we get, we get a lot of kind of commercial clients, especially in indies, who are like, wow, this is amazing, or this is the future of filmmaking. I want to shoot in a living room, like one living room the whole day. And it's expensive, it's a lot of prep, it's a lot of work to do that, right? Where it shines is if you're going to do 5 living rooms, and they have to be localized to different countries, or you want to shoot in a unique location that would be hard to get to, right? So it's very conducive to the crazier ideas, I would say.
Driving scene.
Driving, absolutely.
Yeah, and I would say, as a filmmaker, I'm always like, we look to do it practically first, right? Because a lot of times I'm like, you shouldn't use this technology just to use the technology because you think it's cool. There needs to be a financial or a logistical reason to do it. And we get a lot of people, I'm like, I don't know why I'd be happy for you to use my studio, but you can just go do this on location for half the price.
Just to weigh in on that, though, I want to ask if you, because this is what's occurred to me, is the size of the physical space where you have actors. If you're talking about a really large-scale thing with, 100 cast or something, you are limited by the physical space there. So is that to some degree a reason why to do projects of scale,
Absolutely. And I always say, there's kind of 2 planes, but if there's a lot of cast members that are going deep into the scene, like you can only walk to the LED and can't go any further. And the ground plane, building a ground plane and matching it into the environment is challenging. And there are certain things where it's not practical.
Okay, great. Maybe in the back there?
Plug and play, I don't know if I'd quite say plug and play. The industry is getting productized. Before the Mandalorian, a lot of people think that Disney created virtual production for Mandalorian, but there were a lot of us working on it long before it, right? But the one thing that Mandalorian did was pre-Mandalorian, when we would pitch clients, people were like, this is really cool, but it seems a little risky. And what Mandalorian did was sort of legitimize this as a valid workflow, right? They chose to do this. And it really started off all the incredible investment, not just from studios, but in LED manufacturing and camera systems and tracking systems, right? And every year it's getting more plug and play. I don't think it's plug and play yet, because we're not at the point where you can just rent a studio, an LED from one company, and a server guy, and think you're going to make magic. It's like, each of our systems are very different, and it's a well-oiled machine that we do tons of R&D. It's not like, if you're shooting on location, you don't have the sound guy call the camera guy to make sure that the audio's in sync. It's productized. We're not there yet, but we're definitely heading in that direction.
Yeah, I was just going to mention quickly, though, like the plug and play aspect from our experience is like back to the fix it and prep aspect. So it's like, for example, if you know that you're shooting in like this, cityscape 3D world, then remotely, for example, your director could spend time finding exactly where in the city they want to set up a shot, and then save that location, in front of a church or in front of a school or, a courtyard. So like plug and play, I think to me is like it's getting there, but it really goes back into like the months of preparation. So that shoot day is like plug and play.
I'll also add, as far as like working remotely, the digital environments can be created by someone remotely, and we can run them, and we do that all the time. Having the person who created them on the set is absolutely beneficial. And at the end of the day, it's a film production, right? You're going to have people from the stage on the set interacting with the director and the DP and the department heads, anticipating what they're going to want, trying to figure out how everything can blend together. And that's not something that's you can do remotely. You really have to be there and immersed in the production to do that well.
We got a question down here in the front row.
Have you seen any movement towards small budget and independent science fiction or fantasy with using this new technology?
Yes.
The question was, have you seen any movement to low-budget science fiction and fantasy using this technology?
Last week, we wrapped up a task that we've been working on for several months with a local production company that is going to be bringing a sci-fi feature here later this year. Yeah, specifically because virtual production allows them to do it.
And I think that's amazing, because Chicago is not exactly known for sci-fi films. I've always said, Ridley Scott's not going to shoot his next, Aliens movie in Chicago, but that's changing. And it's, virtual production is bringing a new type of work, which traditionally has not been in Chicago. All of a sudden we're saying, well, yeah, maybe we can do a sci-fi film here.
Which I'm a huge proponent of.
Yes, yes.
All right.
I want to just add one thing, because I've begun to smash many times, as I said earlier, and I want more TV commercials to take advantage of it. I mean, I've mentioned driving scenes, car scenes. I mean, that the screens on the ceiling of the set really help with the reflections, but also think about all the brands that have need a McDonald's or a Burger King or a Walmart or something, and just to create that. And have that over and over and over again.
We do a ton of tabletop work. We have food kitchens and things like that, McDonald's, Burger King, Checkers, and we've been seeing like them adopting this technology in a big way.
I'm getting the 2-minute warning. We're not quite at that stage, are we? Oh, okay. All right. So one more question.
Yeah, TV commercials is kind of one of our specialties, where Andy tends to do more long form. That question is sort of a generic question, and that applies to everybody, is if you have a script or piece of creative, send it to us, right? And we talk it through to see if virtual production is right or not. I know we spend a lot of time not just doing R&D, but helping our clients, which are agencies, do a tests to pitch them, because when you're working with an advertising agency, they're my client, but they're not the client, right? McDonald's is, or Buick, or whatever, right? And so a lot of times we'll do help them do style boards and test shoots to pitch it to their client, because in the end, that's who has the final decision.
Just to quickly add to that, if you're ever in a situation where you're like, oh man, how are we going to do this? The virtual production is very often the answer. That's a good rule of thumb.
Yeah, that's great. I just want to chime in on one thing. We're talking about its applications, and that the basically, you guys, Showrunner has proven that it can be used for, comedy and pilot and television kind of thing, which is fantastic. I think that a great unexploited area in Chicago that I'm really interested in supporting is expansion of comedy production. And I think typically you think of, well, sketch comedy is done the cheapest possible way, and it's not really thinking backgrounds. But I think that this wasn't virtual, but the work that Key and Peele did with sketch, like hyper-realistic, extreme locations, I think there's a lot of potential for collaboration between comedy writers and high-level, virtual production work. I just wanted to ask if you wanted to weigh in on that.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, that's the whole idea. It's like normally when you think of virtual production, you think of just sci-fi, foreign like planets and flying UFOs, but now maybe a living room scene wouldn't be that, like you said, one living room scene. It wouldn't be a good use case. But when you're creating like a 30-minute, maybe total runtime series with 22 different locations that you're trying to shoot in half the time of a normal production schedule, then you're starting to like find a use for virtual, like taking the technology from virtual production and like traditional sets, cafes, apartments, yoga studios, and whatnot. So I think that space is still highly unexplored, and that's part of our mission with Resignation is like bring in the normal scenes, but do something unbelievable with it.
And I always think that the term virtual production covers a lot of ground. Most of the stuff you're seeing here is a full volumetric Unreal scene with camera tracking. But shooting plates and shooting against plates is a totally valid workflow. There's definitely limitations, but even in Resignation, there were some scenes that were just stock plates, or we went out and shot a plate. And so it all kind of depends on the DP's vision of like what's the camera movement here, how much parallax are we going to get. But I always say, don't assume that you can't afford virtual production. We do a lot of building of sets, and there's a window, and we just light up an LED wall instead of a translight or something behind it. And it doesn't need to be in a camera tracked environment. Just a stock plate or something you grabbed with your iPhone is fine back there. So it covers a big variety of workflows.
Great. And before we wrap up, I just want to mention, first of all, there are those 2 other sessions, so if you want to go deeper in this, but also both Resolution and Smash, I understand, do monthly community demos. Can you just talk briefly about that so people know if they want to get a real-life experience of what you're doing, how they can find out about that?
We do an open house once a month and sporadic events. We have an open house going on this weekend as well. You can go there right now and check out the shooting a short film on Mars. Follow us on Instagram, and you'll learn when we are having those.
Yeah, likewise. We shut down the main stage every other month to do R&D and have open houses where people can come in and play and learn. Same thing, follow us on Instagram or Facebook. We always post there when we're doing stuff. We have one coming up in July around the 15th. The date's not totally set, but that'll be, we're going to be doing a big war scene.
Fantastic. And then a final note, I just want to say, as this film commissioner of the city of Chicago, I just want to say that it warmed my heart to hear Jeff's story and the whole story of Peter's work to bring Showrunner here. And what you said about the Chicago film community, I think you can see it's demonstrated on stage right here. We have the most collaborative, most accessible, most inventive film community in the world, I believe. And you can see that demonstrated here at Filmscape, this incredible turnout. So we'll all be accessible to you. We'll hang out for a little bit if you have more questions. But again, let's do it, Chicago. Thank you again.